But I say to you that listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you. And if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. If you lend to those from whom you hope to receive, what credit is that from you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. But love your enemies, do good and lend, expect nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put in your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back. This is the word of the Lord.
Now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed before either of you come up with another clever idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled. Now, this quote from Hermione Granger is one of the most iconic of hers in the whole Harry Potter series. It also sums up her mentality in the first year of her time at Hogwarts, without a doubt. School is what mattered. When I picture Hermione in her first year, I see her on the edge of her seat, arm flailing in the air with the perfectly correct answer to the question from her teacher in her mind. Now, maybe not all of you relate to Hermione throughout the books. Maybe you're more of a Ron or a Harry, or maybe even a Seamus Finnegan. He's the one with the proclivity to blow things up. But if I'm being perfectly honest, when I was around 10 years old, I related more to first-year Hermione Granger than I care to admit. I was always on the edge of my seat, trying my hardest to get the answer right and to make sure my teachers, whether in school or in church or any of my activities, knew that they could always count on me to be listening. So when Jesus starts this passage by addressing to you that listen, I do not feel left out from this. I am ready to track with whatever he has to say. Surely this is going to be an easy 1 + 1 = 2 question, right, Jesus? Just like back in primary and elementary school, I've got the answer down. But of course, with Jesus, it is far from that. The teachings of Jesus stretch us far beyond reason and rationale we think we can rely on in this world, and into a much greater mystery. He's tricky like that, Jesus. And this passage is one that you have most likely heard before. It is what I think of as foundational to the teachings of Jesus. This is a shocking teaching to those who were listening to him, and certainly still today. When we think about it, enemies are not that far away. Maybe it's a strong word for the difficult relationships that come to mind in your life. But Jesus imagines something greater for us still today. When looking at the context of this passage, one could see that Jesus might very well have been referring to the Romans and their crushing oppression. If you are under the cruel rule of an outside power that impacts your everyday life, then that would definitely make sense to think of them as your enemy. Now, because this is a common interpretation of this passage, as Americans with plenty, with power that is hard to fully comprehend in a worldwide context, we should be aware of how we approach this text. We are not the ones necessarily that are the victims being rolled over by other people like the hearers of these words from Jesus. Instead, we are the ones who are often ruling, the ones with the power. We are the enemies. Furthermore, in a more specific context, maybe being white, being rich, being male, these all mean power. And this means reassessing what it is to define your enemy. So, from a big picture, we might very well be an enemy to someone. And even from a small picture, it's probably the same. We have enemies. We are enemies. But if you're anything like me, you would much rather live in denial of this. But when we come to admit the truth of our inclinations toward separation and dissension, that is when we can truly move through it. That is when we decide to take care of ourselves and then to have the capacity to take care of others. We find the golden rule in this passage today that many of us are probably familiar with. And I have come to believe that when we read it, it is not just do to others as you would have them do to you, but even to go the extra mile and do to others as they ask to be done to them. This is what it means to really then care for our enemies, for those that we don't understand, for those who have different identities. We use the right pronouns. We are passionate about representation for all minorities. We listen to our friends and our children and our partners talk on and on about hobbies that maybe we are not as inclined to be interested in. All of this is the work that breeds love, that breeds community. I had the opportunity last weekend to begin my time in a contemplative cohort with Life of the Trinity Ministries here in Dallas. We received a booklet to guide us through fixed hours of prayer, and the main passage of scripture that was included was this one. Our leader explained that when he spent time at an abbey in Marfa, Texas, this was the passage they recited every day. And when our leader asked them why, they said, we keep saying it until we really live it, until we get it right. This passage reminded me of the parable of the Good Samaritan as well. The setup to this holy parable is a question for Jesus. Who is my neighbor? Now, maybe this was asked by the lawyer in good faith. Maybe he genuinely wanted to get it right. Or maybe it was an attempt to limit the love that this lawyer had to give. So when you heard this passage today, maybe you had a similar question. Who even is my enemy really, Jesus? I mean, I don't even really have enemies, if I'm being honest. Obviously, I get along with everyone, Jesus. My life is really fine, okay? Just stay out of it. Instead, Jesus calls us out into the depths of a countercultural love that doesn't make sense. Similar to loving your neighbor as yourself, so also love your enemy as yourself. For your enemy is your neighbor. This means going above and beyond in the mystery of the love of Christ that sustains us. And it also means recognizing that you can never pour from an empty cup. To most fully love my neighbor, to have the capacity to even love my enemy, this means completely loving myself too. I care deeply about creating trauma-informed spaces and making sure everyone knows they are safe and welcome in a place. So with this, I believe we can hold both of these truths together. We can care deeply about the well-being of ourselves and of our people, and also extend love to our enemies. In fact, I think that's the only way we can really do it well. By knowing we are beloved and that we belong, then also we can proclaim that same truth to those about which we find it hardest to believe. There is this interesting connection in language among verse 36 of this passage, which says, "Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." It connects to Leviticus 19:2, which says, "Be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." And Matthew 5:48, "Be perfect, therefore, as your Father in heaven is perfect." When I was younger, the way I read each of these often felt like an insurmountable command that just fed into my perfectionism. But now, I see that being merciful, being holy, being perfect does not mean perfect like I thought, but rather it means something much greater. It means wholehearted living. I'm unable to do any of these things on my own. I don't need to try to muster all this up on my own. When I open myself up to help from God, I can open myself up to the humanity in every single person that I encounter. This is wholehearted living, to counterculturally love and give as Jesus so beautifully teaches us in these verses, to pour out mercy and to give freely, to live in abundance and not in this tit-for-tat competition. We just heard George preach on 1 Corinthians 13 a few weeks ago, but I myself need a fresh reminder almost every day that love does not keep score. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. And Jesus displayed this in a way that still makes no sense. If we were to have one last night on earth, who would we choose to have around us? Who would we invite to that one final dinner party? I don't know about you, but I'm not sure it would be with the person I knew would betray me. Somehow, Jesus invites us to live as he did, even in the most sacrificial and confusing of ways. So much around us tells us to keep score, to live in that tit-for-tat way, driven by scarcity. But wholeheartedness means abundant living. Wholeheartedness means extending a love and a generosity that we do not fully understand. We lost Desmond Tutu almost 2 months ago, and his is a death that continues to impact me. I read his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, for a history class in my undergraduate degree, and it completely changed my life. I had mostly been insulated from the horrors of the South African apartheid, and I had not taken the time to sit and learn from many Anglican voices up to that point either. So when I read his work, I was changed. He speaks of the truth that no one is truly free until everyone is free. He writes, "Anger, resentment, lust for revenge, even success through aggressive competitiveness are corrosive of this good. To forgive is not just to be altruistic, it is the best form of self-interest. What dehumanizes you inexorably dehumanizes me. It gives people resilience, enabling them to survive and emerge still human despite all efforts to dehumanize them. My humanity is inextricably wrapped up in yours, and yours, and yours, in his, and hers, and theirs, down to every breath we take. As we have certainly witnessed in a global pandemic, we are connected. We impact one another. And with this truth, I hope we take Jesus' words seriously. Our time and our humanity is too precious to hate. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." Wilshire, may we all be the ones that are listening on the edges of our seats, ready to give the right answer to this question: who is my enemy? Because we are all part of an inextricable belonging to one another, and because we all carry the image of the divine, I long for the day when we confidently answer, no one. No one is my enemy. Amen.